And this gentleman said to me, we have unfortunately gotten Carl as an asset for the intelligence community because they had some dirt on him, apparently some academic impropriety when he was doing his PhD thesis. And they basically said, you'll be ruined or we'll make you rich and famous. Now you choose. He chose to become rich and famous.
All right, so this is an interesting accusation from none other than Dr. Steven Greer that he made on his podcast. It kind of got overlooked, and I meant to make a video about it earlier, but anyway, let's get to it. Apparently, Steven Greer thinks Carl Sagan, yes, the famed astrophysicist, scientist who was known for the show Cosmos before it got rebooted with Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was also part of making the movie Contact, right, with Jodie Foster, Matthew McConaughey, one of the best films about the, ET phenomena that's ever been put out, period. Well, apparently he thinks Carl Sagan is not who he says he is. Take a listen.
But we're talking at a very sophisticated level now where they could, quote, entrap with false evidence almost anyone. And this has happened to a number of whistleblowers over the years and people who had really hard evidence. So that is a very nasty, dirty trick. Now, the other part of it is we have this on you. Let's say you're Carl Sagan. All right. So his very close friend, Carl Sagan, you can look him up, was a renowned astronomer. He sort of started the search for extraterrestrial intelligence with Frank Drake. One of his closest friends is on our team. He's elderly, but he was best man at Carl Sagan's wedding, and he personally witnessed. And this man is an astronomer also who co-founded the Extrasolar Planetary Society way back 70s or 80s, looking for other planets around star systems. And this gentleman said to me, we have unfortunately gotten Carl as an asset for the intelligence community because they had some dirt on him, apparently some academic impropriety when he was doing his PhD thesis. And they basically said, you'll be ruined or we'll make you rich and famous. Now you choose. He chose to become rich and famous. But he said, Carl, this is his closest friend, best man at his wedding. He said, Carl aged 30 years in 1 month. This was so hard on him psychologically because he basically had to sell his soul to the devil. And I know so many people like that over my 35 years of doing this. And it's very hard to resist. So let's say you have that kind of file. Remember, J. Edgar Hoover famously had all kinds of files on politicians and stuff so he could stay FBI director for decades, right? This is a well-known fact. You can look it up. But imagine an organization way above even what J. Edgar Hoover's dirty tricks could be that would collect or create dirt, but also has virtually unlimited money to put on the street to get people to cooperate. I've told this story. I know the other day I was on a podcast with Patrick Bet-David, and he said, I mentioned I was offered $2 billion by General Stubblebine in 1992. And he said, that's not possible. No one would offer that. And nobody would resist it. I said, well, I did. And it was a serious offer. But the kind of money that they can put on the street ranges, a big range. Now, some people may have a $500,000 price tag. I know a ufologist that took about that much just to say things that were half truths. I won't talk about who it is, but it can go up in range. Ultimately, it's about offering people a very big threat or a very big prize to get their cooperation. And if that doesn't work and they're a little too much trouble, they will then engage in wet works, which is a term. Wets comes from blood, or they targeted killings or assassinations. And that has happened many, many times.
All right, so what do y'all think? Is Dr. Steven Greer right here? He's hearing from quote-unquote best friend of Carl Sagan stating this, which, first of all, if he was his really good friend, why would he go out saying that kind of stuff? That makes no sense. Why would you reveal that about your friend, right? That's such a break in loyalty there, if that's true, right? But I mean, why even state that? That's such a, I don't know. It's kind of seems a little disrespectful to Carl Sagan and his legacy. But with that said, I did find an interesting video that I guarantee you most of you have never seen before. It's from 1966. It's a report from Walter Cronkite, okay, the OG, talking to Carl Sagan and another astronomer from the CIA.
The astronomers have long been the leading theorists on the possibility of life in outer space. Astronomer Carl Sagan is consultant to a current Air Force scientific panel. Astronomer Thornton Page was on a CIA committee that investigated UFO reports in 1952. Its conclusion? No evidence of UFOs.
Our panel was expected to be, and I think was, objective in its approach, and tried to evaluate all the reports without saying they're ridiculous in advance. That has been repeated quite recently, and that is a good reason for talking with Carl Sagan here, because he's in the same position that I was, being the only astronomer in a similar panel.
There's not a single verified or checked out report which is at all connectable with the possibility of extraterrestrial life. It doesn't say that I think extraterrestrial life is impossible. Quite the contrary. I think that many of the stars in the sky have planetary systems. We know enough now about the origin of life to make it appear likely that life arises naturally on the vast bulk of these planets. It's possible, but by no means certain, that life on many of these planets evolves into beings which are as advanced as we, or more advanced. And I don't see any reason why we can't imagine that there are civilizations thousands or millions of years in advance of ourselves, capable of technical feats that we can hardly imagine. If you would believe, as the flying saucer cultists would have us believe, that the majority of the saucer reports are due to visitations, they have a very strange situation. That means several spaceships are coming to the Earth over interstellar distances every day, as if all the anthropologists in the world were to converge on one of the Andaman Islands in the Indian Ocean, because they just invented the fishnet there or something. I think it's much more reasonable if you want to speculate on the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligence, that there are very rare visits from extraterrestrials to the Earth. There's no evidence for this. I just say that's not implausible. But to have several visits a day, I think, is straining credulity. I think a key to what's behind the real belief in flying saucers is most easily obtained if you look at the contact myths. There are several hundred people in the United States who claim to have had personal contact with the inhabitants of flying saucers who have landed. And if you examine these myths, you find that there are some peculiar regularities. The inhabitants of saucers are benevolent, I mean, they're really concerned for our well-being. They're omnipotent, extremely powerful, omniscient, extremely knowledgeable, and they often wear long white robes. Now, this combination is something I've heard in another context. This isn't science, this is religion. And what I suspect is happening is this. We live in very unsettled times. It used to be possible to believe in a personal, benevolent, powerful, all-knowing God who cared about individuals who you could pray to. But now, there's very few people who really believe that, I think. Science, for good or for ill, has destroyed a lot of the traditional theologies. And yet people have the same needs to believe that they always did, perhaps more so because of the times we live in. Well, the flying saucer myths are a really clever compromise. It's a way of having beings that come from the sky, that are worried about us, that are powerful, that are going to step in and prevent us from destroying ourselves, as we very well might, and yet have it in the cloak of science, so that no one can say, nonsense, that doesn't match science. It's all very pseudo-scientific. I would think that, well, at least for the contact myths and probably for a lot of the events of people who just see things they don't understand flying overhead, that what's involved psychology and theology, and not so much the physical sciences.
So, as we have seen, Scientists think the evidence is mounting that life in some form exists elsewhere in the universe. But almost unanimously, they find no evidence that anything out there has come here. One thing is clear. You could not keep a spaceship a secret. Too many professionals with too many powerful instruments are probing the skies these days. Too many journalists could not be restrained from trumpeting one of the greatest news stories of all time. It also seems clear that since the security of our world is involved in converting all UFOs immediately into IFOs, perhaps these phenomena are properly the responsibility of scientists and the military, with periodic reports to the public on what they have found, if anything. The rest of us can emulate the scientists by keeping an open mind, since yesterday's fantasy sometimes turns into tomorrow's reality. We might remember, too, that while fantasy improves science fiction, science is more often served by facts. This is Walter Cronkite for CBS Reports. Good night.
So that's an interesting conversation for sure, and it's interesting to see how they took the topic back in 1966, right? How they were talking about it back then. You could almost close your eyes and imagine that same conversation happening today, right? And we're talking 60 years ago, right? Essentially. So well over a half a century, right? So it's very interesting, like how far have we come in the UFO community, right? Essentially. So I don't know. That's an interesting interview. There's a lot with Carl Sagan online to see for sure, but this one was interesting just because of that guy with the eye patch and the pipe. I mean, so old school. I love it. I mean, who is that guy? That's such a character. I couldn't get enough of that guy, to be honest with you. Old school interviews, you could just light a pipe in the middle of it, right? I miss those kind of things. But that guy was very interesting for sure, right? From the CIA. So did Carl have contacts? Probably, right? Probably had contacts within the intelligence community. Does that mean he was paid off, right? And then couldn't live with that? I don't. That seems really far-fetched. And to be honest with you, if this guy was really his best friend, why would he go around telling people like Steven Greer and things? You know what I mean? It just seems like a break and again, in that trust. It just seems like something you would not do to a real friend of yours. You know what I mean? To reveal that. Why would you do that? It just totally tarnishes his whole legacy, right? That he was paid off, right? Someone as, well-respected as Carl Sagan, right? It just seems kind of out of pocket, to be honest with you. And it just seems like, why would Dr. Steven Greer say that without showing any evidence or proof of that, right? Like, again, even if it was true, like, what is the point? I don't understand. So I personally do not think this is true at all. I think Carl Sagan was not a paid CIA asset or any intelligence community asset. Do I think he had connections to the intelligence community? Well, of course, but that doesn't mean anything, right? If you're going to work at his level, that is going to happen, essentially, right? So, again, just don't buy the story of the best friend at the wedding and all that, I don't know. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments. We'll see you guys in the next video. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace!
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep.